WWT presents Experts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of WWT Experts. I'm your host, Matthew Coble, and today I'm delighted to introduce two experts from worldwide technology in this episode of our four-part series about the global financial services industry and how organizations in that space are dealing with data, security, tech debt, and today's topic, artificial intelligence. Got two colleagues here with me. First is David Reilly, and prior to joining us at WWT, David spent over 10 years as CTO and later CIO at Bank of America, and he's always sought to drive business results via digital transformation. He loves the way that adopting technology can be a positive force for business and culture within those kinds of organizations. In addition to his current role with Worldwide Technology, David is an active board member of several organizations, both commercial and nonprofit, and he blends his passion for technology together with that strong sense of human purpose. Also with us is Bill Stanley, who's a chief technology advisor with Worldwide Technology, and he's been with us here at the company for a little over 5 years. He focuses on artificial intelligence and data strategy with our clients to help them leverage their data through analytics and AI to achieve those business results that they're looking for. He also brings that passion for technology to higher education as he's an adjunct professor and teaches grad students about data science and analytics, and probably also AI, as that's our topic for today. Gentlemen, great to see you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Matt. Looking forward to it.
Indeed. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So first question for you. Where are financial institutions today on the AI adoption curve in general?
I'd say at this stage, Matt, it's still quite early. Almost all companies now have already established a policy and a governance framework for how they would look at both use cases and then AI implementations, whether that's AI or generative AI. And a few early use cases, generally quite low risk use cases, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But I'd say the early innings with a key focus on governance and policy to make sure within the institution, and of course with your regulatory partners, there's an established framework in place for how we would go about decisioning, testing, and then ultimately implementing these technologies.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree. I'd say early on more for the generative AI, but more adoption in the applied AI area, right? Machine learning, some of those things, especially when we think about trading and some of the other facets. Some of those technologies have been in place for a long time. So more advanced in some areas, less in others.
Yeah. Well, so as you talk with technology leaders in the financial services industry, what advice do you give to them as they're thinking about either sort of advancing the early AI work they're doing or getting started with AI in some new areas?
I think, Matt, one of the key things, particularly in financial services, is to broaden the tent, so to speak, to ensure that you bring with you your audit, your risk, your compliance partners, along with your business partners. Inside of regulated financial institutions, those groups are referred to as the second and third line, the third line being audit, the second line being compliance, risk, privacy. Those control groups have an explicit responsibility to ensure that all of the technology that we use and all of the processes that we use inside the institution are adequately controlled. And so they really do help balance the opportunity with the inherent risks that we're all very clear-eyed about. Mm-hmm. And so I think advice point number one would be, despite sometimes the energy and the push and the momentum that there can be generally in the marketplace, or even with your business partners, to go forward without full engagement from the second and third line compliance, risk, privacy, and audit, I'd say would be a mistake. And so bringing those control partners with you on the journey around how you're evaluating the technology, how you're evaluating the use cases, how it's going to be implemented, what are the controls that will be in place that ensure we can leverage all of the opportunity that these technologies afford us without placing any of our customer data or even our proprietary data at risk, for example, is critical. And that means there is a natural pace of adoption that your organization can move at with that broader team. And incidentally, ensuring that you've got privacy, risk, compliance, and audit moving along with you along this journey is going to be something that the regulatory team that you partner with look for wherever in the world you happen to conduct this business as a financial services institution. And so I think gauging and understanding the pace at which your control partners can move at really dictates how fast you can adopt these technologies. Outpacing those partners generally will lead to having to do rework as a second or third order phrase, which ultimately will slow the project down. And so I think initially the key point is going to be bring those partners with you, create the transparency and the engagement model around how you govern decisions, how you govern the testing, what your approval gates are in terms of product identification, use case validation, and then ultimately implementation is going to be key. And this is familiar terrain for most practitioners within financial services organizations. I'd say for these technologies, it's probably never been more important than it is now to ensure that you bring those control partners with you from the beginning of the journey right the way through implementation and into production.
Mm-hmm. And Bill, is that consistent with what you're seeing as well, or what technology advice are you providing? What advice are you giving to technology leaders yourself?
Yeah, I would just add to that. It's absolutely a use case based approach, right? You have to have focus, and it has to deliver value to the business. A lot of AI projects fail or fail to become implemented because they don't deliver that value, right? It's exploratory. So with new technologies, a lot of time people want to go and say, well, there must be value in that data. I'll kind of sift through it and see what I can find. But I think it's very important to have a use case based approach, business outcome in mind, and then an executive sponsor and commitment and leadership there, and building that center of excellence around that effort. It's incredibly important to be successful with that first AI effort, right? That's going to gain momentum and build upon itself. So just kind of echoing what we just heard, right? That use case based approach, but I definitely would add the executive sponsorship and leadership and building out the center of excellence around that.
Yeah. Well, let me build on that a little bit. And, David, I'm curious if you're seeing that the enthusiasm and excitement around AI is coming from the technology leadership, the business leadership, the executive team, or is that sort of varying as you're looking at different financial services institutions out there?
I think all of the above, Matt, with each institution being slightly a different rank order, 1, 2, 3, or maybe better said 1A, 1B, and 1C, because I think everybody sees the incredible opportunity that exists for the use of these technologies, but with being clear-eyed about there are always risks with technologies like these, be it data access risk, bias risk, some concentration risk that we need to be mindful of. And one of the points Bill made, I think it's worth double clicking on. One of the emerging almost best practices that I think we've begun to see, and I know the team at WWT is seeing this across the broad spectrum of industries that we partner with, is this idea of establishing a center of excellence around AI, particularly for large organizations, rather than each of the individual technical practitioner groups figuring it out their way or on their own. An emerging best practice I see, and I'd love to hear Bill's view on this, is that there are pieces of this around maybe use case validation, use case implementation, risk assessment, readiness assessment, where a center of excellence is incredibly valuable, that you can repeat these cycles as companies come to understand and learn how do these technologies work best for us. There'll be slightly different answers for each company. But Bill, if you wouldn't mind, it'd be great to hear what some of your early observations, notwithstanding it is early, around the value people are getting by establishing that early center of excellence.
Definitely. You have to have all the players at the table, right? It can't be just a technology effort, and we certainly don't want it to be just a business effort. We don't want shadow AI to prop up, that we've got to be very careful about that. So having that center of excellence to put the guardrails around it, a lot of the other things you mentioned, right? The governance, security. I mean, there are so many risks. We need to mitigate the risks as much as possible, and that center of excellence will absolutely help us do that. They'll also ensure that we have participation across the organization, right? There's a lot to know about AI, and there's still a lot of fear about AI out there, right? So the Center of Excellence will help alleviate that. It also helps us determine what is the best course of action for education to bring people in. So there's so much value associated with establishing that Center of Excellence early on that will help folks be successful with their first effort.
Well, Bill, earlier you made mention of use cases, and I'm curious if you could speak to some kind of early introductory starting use cases that our clients have seen that they've had good success with. Give us some examples of that, and what does that success look like?
Definitely, and the quick win areas, right? That's, talk about the use case and being successful with that first effort. A lot of the customer support in terms of chat, large language models, that's a great area to start. We've seen a lot of success in that area. We have to be mindful too with AI that it's not a one size fits all, right? It's not going to be one AI solution for the entire enterprise. And also, AI is creeping in from other places, right? And if we think about our vendors and the applications we're using, we're going to have AI in a bunch of places. So again, coming back to that Center of Excellence, right, and how that helps bring it all together. But audit is another area, right? Compliance, those are areas that really, really can benefit quickly from AI. So those are probably the ones that are top of mind for me.
Mm-hmm. David, any there that you'd build on that you're seeing?
I think, Matt, Bill's point about audit being a really rich use case area, I think is something that organizations should push on. It has the added benefit of, if you can pull your audit partners close in terms of a use case that they could use, that's a team that is very naturally control mindset oriented. And so if they become an early adopter of an early use case, they're going to learn how these technologies can and should be controlled, and they're going to help as a result not just improve the audit function productivity-wise, but help you broaden the adoption of those kind of adjacent use cases inside the company. Think of the prep work that has to be done before an audit's undertaken internally, reviewing all of the self-identified issues, all of the historical information, a wealth of documentation that the auditor needs to go through to scope the audit that's about to begin. That's a great area as a potential use case for these technologies, and I've seen that being implemented at a couple of organizations. Mm-hmm. It's a short walk from there, Matt, to the idea of AI being used for continuous auditing. Most audit teams, they'll audit an area, a business, a process, a piece of technology, perhaps annually, maybe once every 2 years. These technologies lend themselves to have the audit team continuously auditing a set of controls around that technology or that process or that business area. And so if you can pull the audit team close, there's two ways to do that there. Contact center, that's another area where it's a relatively low risk use case around call transcription or call summarization. At the end of every contact center call, the agent has to spend time transcribing the call that they had with the customer. AI is a great way to give that agent a starting point where the call can be transcribed in real time. At the end of the call, the agent doesn't have to begin transcribing their notes from zero. They can look at the automatically generated transcription, make the edits and move on. Less time typing, more time talking with customers. Mm-hmm. And the last area I would say is code generation. One of the episodes that we had recently was around legacy technology. For a lot of financial services organizations, there's a lot of legacy code out there that the originators who built that code are no longer with the organization. Sometimes when you move into an end-of-life remediation, getting good line of sight to actually the code that needs to be remediated prior to getting off of the end-of-life platform is a real challenge. Documentation may be not as efficacious as we would want it to be. These technologies, the code generation technologies, can be used to learn that legacy code and even provide advice or guidance or a first set of remediation actions that developer that's been given that legacy code to remediate can get a jump start on. What those use cases have in common is they're generally low risk. They're not customer facing, not immediately customer facing. And so they're areas where you're somewhat pushing on an open door, very manual, very resource intensive. Anything we can do to help improve productivity in those low risk areas, I think are great early use cases to scrutinize with your organization as potential ways to begin to broaden the ways in which, in production, these technologies could be used.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about low risk. I want to kind of go in the other direction, right? So on the world in general, I think we're all like, oh, AI is amazing. It can do everything. But I imagine that within the financial services space, there may be some use cases that technology leaders and business leaders should avoid or be kind of cautious with at this point in this stage of AI. Like, do you see any of those out there? Any advice like that you're giving clients?
There's two that I would point to. One would be, I think anywhere where the area that you're looking to leverage this technology is directly customer facing, where the customer will be getting direct advice or direct guidance that won't have been vetted before that guidance is delivered because it's 100% generated by the technology. I would be cautious in those areas, Matt, because I think it's a little early and they're obviously much higher risk. The consequence of being wrong without a human that's verifying the advice before it's given, at this stage at least, would probably one of the more aggressive or some of the more ambitious ways to start. So I would tend to lean away from anywhere where the advice that would be given directly to a customer would be 100% generated by the technology and not being vetted before it was given. That moment will come. I'm not sure that moment's now. So that would be point one. Mm-hmm. Point two would be, if the area that you're looking to leverage the AI technology is in support of a process that is not a very well understood or even a very well defined process with a lot of variability around it, that's probably not a good area to cut your teeth on, not a good area to start. So I would pick a process that's quite well understood. The measurements of its success are well understood within the organization. And that's going to give you the best opportunity to understand, did I get the productivity benefit that I thought I would? Was it better, worse, or exactly where I thought it would be? Because I know that process so well, and we've got a well understood routine around how we measure the efficacy of that process. So a solid process, I think, is a good place to start. And anywhere where you're not directly given unvetted advice to an end customer, a place to avoid.
Bill, how about from your point of view, any risk areas that you would point people away from in the near term?
I would just add to that, right? I think that's really, you don't want anything that's not controlled, vetted, double-checked by human initially, or code too, right? I mean, we really got to test and review these things. And that goes back to data quality, right? And do we have the data? Do we have enough data? So data being the core of anything we're going to do around AI. And I think you've already covered some of those data things, but so tremendously important. But yeah, I wouldn't want to put anything out at this point that's not checked by a human in any way, shape, or form, or tested and vetted. And you know, the other thing I wanted to add about use cases, we talked about a lot about risk, but I think it's really important to evaluate the value and complexity when we think about our use cases, right? Not that we're always going to go for the low-hanging fruit. We might have something that's core. It may be a little more complex, but it's going to deliver a lot of value. So we really have to make sure we're evaluating value and complexity. And part of complexity is the data. Right? Is the data there? Is the data consistent? Do we have enough data for the things we're trying to answer? I think an interesting area too in finance, I was reading some statistics about the number of accounts and organizations that people do business with now in terms of finance. And how much of our customers' data do we really have? Do we even have enough to create a complete profile of that particular customer? And we think in terms of know your customer, it's very important for specific transactions. And we think about looking for fraud. We can do that pretty well, but how are we in terms of a complete profile picture of our customer in terms of how much of their financial portfolio do we have?
This episode is brought to you by Big Panda. Big Panda empowers the teams that keep the digital world running. Big Panda transforms incident management from manual, reactive, and unscalable ticket response to fully automated operations.
Well, I know that, artificial intelligence isn't entirely new to financial services. I mean, there's been predictive AI, machine learning, and other sort of techniques that have been used in the industry. It's a very bit-driven, data-centric industry, so that totally makes sense. I imagine Gen AI is sort of a newer aspect that a lot of leaders are coming to grips with. But my question here is, given that legacy and the newer stuff, like what are the things that technology leaders need to be doing in these organizations to set the organization up for really long-term success with all of the artificial intelligence work that they're doing?
I think Bill's point, Matt, around data readiness is key. At this stage, to be really clear-eyed about the data that we have available, that we want to exercise the generative AI across, how complete and correct is that data set? Because the AI can't make up for any of those fundamental deficiencies in the data set. And that may be an uncomfortable dialogue to have because the opportunity may be enormous, but if you don't have, let's call it the raw material of enough, to Bill's point, high quality data, then the outcomes that you're going to get, the recommendations you're going to get, the outputs you're going to get from the AI are going to be reflective of that data. You're right. Financial services has generally been a very early adopter of these kind of technologies. And whether it's machine learning or the early incarnations of AI, financial services has been right there at the forefront. And so there's a degree of comfort around what these technologies are likely to mean. Ensuring, as we touched on a little bit earlier, that your control partners are coming on that journey with you to ensure that compliance, risk, privacy, audit, and the regulators are with you every step of the way, with you and your business partner who can see that opportunity is going to be key. And I think setting up that kind of internal governance and that center of excellence that Bill talked about earlier, that may feel like you're going a little slower early on, but it's going to ensure that you can move a lot faster later on. And I think some of the best practices that WWT have adopted, even internally, for assessing use cases inside of Worldwide, things like the AI driver's license, if I've got the terminology right, I think that's a great best practice for people to understand, because everybody inside your company has to be familiar enough with these technologies to not just use them, but to see where the use cases are and to be clear-eyed about the risks. Mm-hmm. Those are the couple of the areas I think that practitioners can start to work on now to prepare for the future, because these use cases are only going to grow in volume. The technologies are only going to get more and more sophisticated. Ensuring that those building blocks are in place and that you're bringing all of those key constituents along with you and educating people as you go is absolutely key to ensure that you set your organization up for long-term success and the adoption of these kind of technologies and use cases.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I always point folks to the platform, right? We have the CEO's Guide to AI Adoption. It's fantastic. There's a whole framework that's laid out there, and it covers a lot of the things we were talking about. And just to echo that piece about education, you mentioned the AI driver's license. So incredibly important, the education piece of it, right? We've talked a lot about risk. That risk isn't always just internal, right? How many stories have we read about people that took emails, they copied and pasted them into some publicly available large language model, and data's leaked that way? So just simple education for folks around the risks outside of the organization and things to be aware of that they might not. So that AI driver's license, I think, is incredibly valuable for many, many reasons. But yeah, the CEO's Guide to AI Adoption out on the platform is a fantastic framework. It mentions the Center of Excellence, it mentions education, it mentions that AI is not a one-size-fits-all. We talked about that a little bit too. It's not just one AI, it's not one technology that's going to solve all your problems. It's going to be everywhere. It's going to be pervasive. I think the other thing that I like to make sure I mention is that the time getting started is now, right? We talked about data quality and consistency. You can find some place where you have data that's ready, but the AI train is leaving the station. It's very important to get on that train. You don't want to get left behind, because it's all opinion, but I think we're going to see a lot more disruption with these technologies. So best to get started now.
Oh. Well, I appreciate
And Bill, one of the areas, just to build on that point, that I think it's a group that we haven't talked about yet, but I think is a great area for use cases, is your cyber team and your security operations center, the InfoSec community. The bad actors that they defend us against
Indeed.
are aggressive adopters of these technologies because they just lower the price point of scouring the network to find ways into the organization, on top of all of the phishing and other attack vectors that get opened up. Things like continuous pen testing, continuous red team testing, great ways to leverage these technologies to harden the shield around your company. And so as practitioners, that other constituent of information security, Matt, pulling that team close to find those use cases that will help better defend, or perhaps even better defend the institution, I think is a great set of partners to pull close. And again, relatively low risk in terms of everybody inside your company would accept that, number one, the bad actors are aggressively using these technologies, and therefore, number two, we should find ways to leverage them to harden our defenses. That would be another group to pull close and see if you can find some early use cases.
Yeah. Well, I know, David, we did another whole episode on security and financial services, which for those of you tuning in, you can find that on WWT.com. And I appreciate you both kind of plugging some other things we've got out there on WWT.com. So check out that AI driver's license, and we've got a great deal of content around AI in general. It's such a hot topic. We're writing about that all the time. So when we're talking about financial services, eventually we have to get to this idea of the regulatory environment, right? So I wanted to ask you both, David, let's start with you. Like, what are organizations in the industry going to need to keep in mind relative to how regulators are going to be thinking about AI and its impact?
I think the first thing to recognize, Matt, is that your regulatory partners are expected to exercise oversight and control around these technologies. And we all understand as practitioners how difficult it is to manage the complexity within the heterogeneous environments that we all run. These technologies have just made that even more complex, even more heterogeneous. Challenge for all of us, but just as equal a challenge for your partners in the regulatory communities. And so bringing them with you from day one is absolutely key. And that means there's a pace, again, they can move at, and you're going to have to match that pace. At times that may feel a little frustrating, but it's absolutely crucial that you bring those partners with you. And there are two sets of things I think at this stage to keep in mind. Your partners in the regulatory communities are going to expect policy, governance, guidelines, oversight, and that you can evidence that you are compliant with all of those. And so being able to show that there are ways in which you've established a control framework that is measurable and that you can show that you are compliant with, and where maybe you found instances where you weren't, what you did about that, that would be point one. That's fairly basic in terms of foundational. The other area, Matt, I think that's emerging is this idea of intent. Can you prove to me, can you show me that the way in which the data was used proves intent? The way you trained the model, the way the model then exercised itself across the data that you gave it, that there was nothing accidental about either the data that you leveraged to exercise the AI over or the data that you used as input to train the model. Prove to me that you did that with intent. Being able to look back at that and prove that you did that not just within the governance framework that you'd established, but with intent. There was nothing accidental. You didn't, as well intended as it may have been, accidentally overgrant access to data via the AI. That's going to be something that the regulatory community, quite rightly, is going to expect that as practitioners and risk partners and compliance partners and audit partners that we can prove that. So intent would be the second area, I think, to keep in mind, that you can prove that there was nothing accidental about this, that this was done with intent, and it's intent that you can prove.
All right. Well, last question for both of you here. I'm curious if you believe that at some point in the future, put your futurist hat on, are there any key milestones you think that we'll see in financial services when it comes to AI? Like, David, maybe think about sort of that moment when you don't need a human in the loop, perhaps, or maybe there's some other moments in the future you think will be sort of key seminal moments in terms of how AI affects that industry. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's probably a bit too early to say. No, there definitely will be. I'm not sure what those are going to be, Matt. I do think just because the implementation of technologies like this generally follows a pattern where there become moments, public moments, where the technology didn't perform the way it was supposed to and a problem occurs. Mm-hmm. In those moments, the temptation is to pull back and to pump the brakes. And we should always learn from any mistake that gets made anywhere in the world with the use of a technology. We should all try to draw as much learning as we can from those unfortunate instances. But I think key is going to be quickly assessing, is there anything about this thing that we've learned, this event that occurred, that means we should slow down? And I would advise caution about slowing down. I don't think that's going to be wise. Ensuring that you're moving forward with intent and within the governance framework that we spoke about, even though there may be in the wake of some of those public things that go wrong, quite a loud chorus that says, well, maybe we should slow down. I think as practitioners, Matt, in those moments, there'll be plenty of people inside your organization that advocate to pull back on the pace, and maybe they're right. I think as practitioners, that's our role then to say, no, we should maintain the focus and the energy that we've got. We should ensure that we've drawn every ounce of learning we can from the event that occurred, and where we need to, adjust our policies, adjust our governance, adjust our uses, but slowing down would be a mistake. And so I think as practitioners in those moments, while it can feel somewhat tempting to slow down, I would advise against it. Once you've learned the lessons and you're confident that your controls are performing the way you want them to, I think as practitioners, we have to be on the other side of that trade, saying, no, we can't let this slow us down. There's nothing, we've learned from it. There's nothing that tells us what we're doing should slow down. We've adjusted course where that makes sense. So we continue full steam ahead at the pace that works for your organization.
Yeah. Bill, how about you? Any key moments you're looking forward to, or, if you prefer, like any last advice you want to share with our audience before we wrap?
Yeah, I think it's always the headlines, right? And those are the mistakes. Those are what we see. So I agree. We've got to learn from those, be mindful of those, but certainly not slow down. We have to get started now and be moving forward, because I really believe we're going to see a lot of disruption in the space with this technology. So if you wait, you're just going to be left behind. And the time is now to get started. And there are plenty of safe places to get started.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, gentlemen, very much appreciate you spending time with us today. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and thank you for joining us as well. Another great session with us here. And if you like this one, please go to WWT.com and check out the other 3 in this series about financial services, where we talk about data, security, and tech debt. And there's a great catalog of all kinds of events and videos out on WWT.com. You can see what's coming up on the calendar and watch anything on demand from what's out there already. And we always love to hear your feedback. So if you get the survey and email, please let us know your thoughts, or just drop us an email and tell us what you thought. And we'll share that information with our guests. That is a wrap for today's session. Thanks for coming. We'll see you next time.